Hey guys, back with your regularly scheduled Apocalyptic Shadow Guide, this time versus 3.3's Cocolia and Kafka. Here's what I'll be covering in this video. Feel free to skip to any sections you need using the timestamps in the description. The description also has a link to the slideshow, a spreadsheet filled with sample teams, and a Google form if you'd like to add your team to that list. As you'd expect, both Cocolia and Kafka have more HP than the last time they appeared. Cocolia went from a 1.79 million HP in 2.7 to 2.89 million HP now, gaining 1.1 million, or an increase of 61.5%. Kafka went from 2.22 million HP in 2.6 to 3.07 now, gaining 850k HP, or an increase of 38.5%. They still have the same toughness though, with Cocolia having effectively 150 on phase 1 and 230 on phase 2 after killing her summons, and Kafka having an effective 130 each phase after her summons are killed. Speed-wise, Cocolia is at a modest 172, with her first action being advanced by 80%, letting her first turn outspeed most characters. Kafka, on the other hand, is at a faster 198 speed, but starts with a 50% delay, meaning her turn acts at an effective 99 speed the first time she goes. In terms of resistances, both have the standard 40% res, besides Cocolia's 60% ice res. Cocolia is also CC immune, which realistically only affects Anaxa looking at the elemental matchup, while Kafka only has 75% freeze res, which doesn't meaningfully affect any usable counters for the same reason. Everyone on Kafka's side also gets a minus 25% damage reduction per elite, for a total of 50%, so yeah, no killing Kafka until you get through her elites first. Unique to this AS though, Cocolia's side takes 20% less damage, but takes 5% more damage for every weakness they have. This means that Cocolia takes normal damage with all her implants, but it also means that under Anaxa's ult, for example, she and everyone else affected takes 15% more damage. Pretty sneaky, Hoyo. Both bosses also deal 10% more damage across the board due to their base attack being increased by 10%, so survival requirements will be slightly harder than average. As for their spawns, they also have their HP increased by 61.5% on Cocolia's side and 38.5% on Kafka's side, so if they seem tankier than last time, that's because they are. With that said, all of the non-Cocolia enemies on her side only have 20% res with their non-weak elements as opposed to the usual 40 to 60%. Cocolia has one main elite, Chapard, who has 1.39 million HP, 200 toughness, and 50% control res, acts at 165 speed, and locks everyone else's toughnesses on turn 2 until the shield takes enough damage or Chapard is directly broken. Besides Chapard, on the first turn of each phase, she distributes her weaknesses across 2 ice edges on phase 1 with 152k HP, 40 toughness, and 190 speed, and 4 Lance of the Eternal Freezes on phase 2 with 110k HP and 40 toughness. The left summons are always staggered to move faster than the right ones. Killing all of them puts those weaknesses back on her, and also deals a total of 40 toughness for your troubles. Kafka, on the other hand, spawns 2 elites per phase and distributes their weakness to them at 0 AV, before she even takes her turn. Resistance-wise, these elites have 20% res versus the other elites' elements, as well as the usual 40% res of 3 elements Kafka is never weak to. The first phase has her spawn 2 Spacies with 317k HP and 100 toughness, a faster blaze on the left that starts advanced by 25% and alternates between bounces and nukes that can burn, plus a slower ice on the right that starts delayed by 25% and inflicts AoE freezes every turn. On phase 2, she instead summons 2 dinos. The left dino is a faster Overcooked with 396k HP and 100 toughness that acts immediately and inflicts AoE damage with a chance to slow. The right dino is a slower shell with 713k HP and 80 toughness that deals massive bounce damage. It also takes 60% less damage if not broken, and 50% more when broken. Killing either of these elites inflicts 85 toughness to Kafka, gives the other elite its weaknesses, and adds 50% vuln speed to it, so it becomes more threatening, but also easier to kill. Killing both will finally transfer those weaknesses back to Kafka. Now that we've reviewed what these bosses are like, let's see what they've given our characters to compensate for their increased HP. Firstly, upon break, everyone gets un-CC'd, all skill points are restored, and everyone gets their ultimates fully charged. Everyone also gets a blanket 50% healing boost, which is actually implemented as plus 50% outgoing healing boost, not a separate healing multiplier. This means that the more outgoing healing you have, especially on break sustains like Gallagher and Linksha, who have outgoing healing conversion traces, the less of a final healing increase you'll see. Altogether, these buffs let SP-hungry options like Bronya, Anaxa, Hyacea, and Firefly, to name a few, play at full potential without worrying as much about SP issues. They also provide a second wind to all focus characters like Akron and Casterus, who regain their nukes, Fei Xiao and Yun Li, whose energy system let them regain 2 at once, and RMC, who registers all that energy as charge, usually gaining around 40 to 50% charge off a full team regen. And of course, more healing helps HP scalers like Maide, Blade, Casters, and Hyacine, who can convert that HP gain to more survivability and damage alike. In terms of selectable buffs, looking at Cocolia's side, Call of Dawn increases Memo Sprite's weakness break efficiency by 50%, as well as provides them with 20% defense ignore. That's like half of E1 Ranmei's kit, Holy Cannoli, and synergizes very well with Caster's S1, as well as Sunday's and Aglaya's Eidolons. It even helps Lil Ika shed more toughness, so yeah, there's your rotational Remembrance shill. Baron of Life lets characters re-trigger DOTs for 80% of the original damage twice per turn. While this is basically a second Kafka on steroids, or hopefully just a second Kafka after the buffs, Boothill's Break Bleeds also count as DOTs, and oh boy, does that max HP percent floor mean that they hit incredibly hard. He is by far the best abuser of this buff, and it's not close. Salvaging Force increases crit damage of ultimates by 30%, jumping up to 60% against weakness-broken targets. This is the buff you'll be picking on most teams, but pairs especially well with ult-focused DPS like Fei Xiao and Akron. As for the other side, Crimson Tide is the first general buff, as while not all units can leverage the 50% physical damage boost, they all appreciate healing 20% HP per skill. I'd say this helps with sustainless runs, but let's be honest, the damage check and lack of heals between phases make this way more difficult. Turn of Luck is your usual follow-up buff, giving 15% res 10 to follow-ups, as well as letting them break at 50% of the original toughness off element, just like a Fugue skill. Ratio and Fei Xiao teams will definitely appreciate the damage boost, while those same teams with Lingsha and Aventurine will like the reduced rainbow toughness as well. Rhyme Piercer provides 10% break vulnerability, plus 20% speed to all allies for 2 turns after breaking. This is the second general buff to keep in mind, and should help your team be faster if you prefer it over the comfiness of the first one. Of course, it is primarily for break DPS such as Rappa, Boothill, and Firefly, and Hunt March for you budget breakers out there. Note that this rotation should stick around for a little less than a week after 3.4 releases, so you can test out the buff characters as well as Finon, Saber, and Archer versus these bosses. And between you and me, I'd say it's very likely that they destroy one, if not both sides of this AS. As for general strategies, focus on bringing high single target and blast toughness dealers. Weakness and planners like Boothill, Firefly, Silverwolf, and especially Anaxa can also skirt around weakness redistribution mechanics, since doing so doesn't come with locking toughness, so keep that in mind as well. For Cocolia, you'll want to focus her Ice Edges and Lances first to reduce the number of attacks she deals, as well as unlock her weaknesses. After that, it's a matter of disabling Japar as soon as possible to prevent or reduce the amount of time that Japar locks everyone else's toughnesses. Also, be prepared for freezes, as there will definitely be a lot of them headed your way. As for Kafka, kill the elites first at all costs, especially since it removes a pesky 25% damage reduction for her vanquished elite. Focus whichever one you can handle, receiving a 50% speed and vulnerability boost after it dies, which is usually the non-threatening one. Also, make sure your emergency sustain is ready for the start of Phase 2, since it opens with a huge combined AoE and single target attack. There will be other damage windows you can also track, based on the elites and Kafka's turns, but that burst on phase change is pretty much always going to happen. Alright, with the context of this fight established, let's see how everyone matches up versus Cocolia and Kafka. As a disclaimer, all these lists are based on what I've observed as well as my own knowledge, so it is limited in scope and might not reflect what's best for your account. I've also tried to stick with on-element DPS, so keep that in mind. Here's my logic for each of said placements though. Fei Xiao is still the queen versus Cocolia, with toughness values having stayed the same, getting 2 free ults every break, and having new tools with Tribi, RMC, and Hyacine. Moza is their best sub DPS if you're able to focus down Cocolia, followed closely by March, and then by Topaz, who falls short of Moza's attack frequency or March's toughness, but otherwise allows for dealing respectable damage. Caster's comes very close, matching her sustainless scores with Hyacine, thanks to Membo Sprites receiving a 50% weakness break efficiency boost, making her 0 AV Netherwing deal 105 toughness, over half of Phase 1. She also gets another one upon breaking, and also appreciates the 50% outgoing healing bonus this stage provides. Anaxa excels in both main DPS and sub DPS roles, uniquely providing a net 15% vuln with all of his implants thanks to the AS buff scaling. As hypercarry, his numbers are no slouch, but when paired with the Herda, he lets her speedrun Cocolia, which is absurd when you realize Cocolia is 60% ice res and mostly single target. The SP refund on break also lets him skill spam, which is amazing for his personal toughness. Firefly also matches up well versus Cocolia. Since her fire implant allows her to bypass weakness transfer mechanics, her teammates are good at reducing toughness, the SP refund on break lets her spam skills at E0, and ult refreshes can be abused for lower DDD procs, as well as to give herself an instant ult before her first one runs out. While slightly more expensive, Acheron can optimally use Silver Wolf and or Xiao Qiu here, who also reduce enemy toughness. Her Rainbow Toughness ult is always appreciated, and of course a free ult on break helps her close out each phase. About 2/3 of Aglaya's toughness is from Garment Maker, so the 50% Memo Sprite weakness break efficiency buff is nice and compensates for her lower toughness per hit. Getting free ults on break is also obviously great for her. Boot Hill and the Herda are the best off-element picks by far. As mentioned before, the Herda needs Anaxa for implants, but with him she can steamroll Cocolia, much to my initial surprise. Boot Hill, on the other hand, provides his own implants, and he's able to abuse a DOT buff to deal massive damage upon breaking. Speaking of DOT units, they also appreciate the DOT buff, and can get a consistent 3-star clear. Qingyuan and Blade have enough premium support options at this point that they can also do well if supported properly. Think of Qingyuan as a prototype for Aglaya and Blade as a prototype for Saber. Keep in mind that Kafka and Blade are due for buffs before the rotation is over, and I swear, somehow, Qingyuan will indirectly benefit from 3.4 changes like he always does. As for non-limited options, honestly categorizing Seela here is questionable, but I genuinely have no idea where else to put her. 61.5% HP inflation from Cocolia's last appearance has killed any semblance of non-whale sustainless runs. The cheapest run I could find on Bilibili had almost everyone in E2, including Seela herself, and of course nerfs her sustained performance as well. Shui and Xingshi can also work at higher investments, though that much HP bloat sucks for them too. With Kafka's fight structure allowing for blasts but incentivizing single target the most, of course Fei Xiao still destroys her. The sub-DPS ranking this time is Hunt March first for her toughness and attack rank frequency, followed by Topaz. Moza is unfortunately off element and hates switching targets. Naxa falls a bit behind her due to his bounce skill going against the kill one at a time philosophy of this fight, but a 60% damage increase while 3 enemies are present and universal toughness reduction for everyone means that he doesn't fall awfully behind. Every breaker does pretty well versus this fight. Rappa in my opinion does the best, but needs the most expensive team with Linsha and Fugue for optimal performance, as well as taking Ranmei for herself. Boot Hill at max pocket trick shots destroys this fight, but he desperately wants Fugue to gain them as fast as possible. Firefly is the safest and cheapest for support options, but needs her E2 to truly speedrun this fight. March is notably worse, and here is a budget pick, but her single target toughness is up there with the rest of them, and with vertical supports, she can reach nearly the same level as the big 3. Dill, Yunli, and Mighty all fall under the same category of decent toughness and high damage on paper, but not having an efficient way to break and kill enemies one at a time. Interestingly, they all benefit from different aspects of AS. Dill likes the SP and ult on break, Yunli likes the physical damage and skill heal, plus 2 ults per break, and Mighty loves the healing on skill, Kafka's high damage output, and the 50% outgoing healing boost. The Herda and Castris both need implants from Anaxa and Silverwolf respectively, so actually switch the pairings you see on screen. I couldn't find any better images, but given access to toughness reduction, they can absolutely shred the stage. Ratio and Topaz are, of course, both part of the original follow-up team, but aren't exactly tied to each other. Ratio has other debuffers like Xiao Qiu and Tribi, while Topaz still works well with the Fei Xiao's Fart variant. Still, both do fall short nowadays of older hunts, so while they can clear, don't expect any exceptional scores. Non-limited options that could work for this fight include Clara, Sushang, and Luca. Clara works with Dai Yunli, Sushang will likely play full super break but could lean into crit, and Luca can play into the huge toughness bar for massive break leads like a budget Boot Hill, though I'm personally iffy on his viability nowadays. Honorable mention to Welt, especially with his CC being helpful versus a high damage fight, but I want to see proof of concept beyond insane bounce skill RNG before giving him the okay. Thankfully, sustains are a bit more straightforward. Healers are generally favored since they get a free 50% outgoing healing bonus, but fortunately, shielders aren't straight up invalidated like with the MOC Pollux fight. Hyacine is of course the top pick versus Cocolia, especially when paired with Casterus. Even without Cassie though, Little Ika gains 50% weakness break efficiency, 20% defense ignore, as well as 50% outgoing healing, helping with both highest personal toughness and damage. And where Fire Break is needed, Lingsha will of course be useful. Whether you want to use her or Gallagher honestly depends. For comfortability and reliable cleanse, Lingsha will be better, but for energy and SP, Gallagher ekes out the win. Huohuo is a must on energy-hungry teams like Aglaeus. She negates Cocolia's freezes, and the ult refund on break helps ult-reliant teams ult even ultier. She just lacks personal toughness damage. Luocha has healing for days, can resist most freezes, and has more comfy healing than Gallagher at the trade-off of generating slightly less SP. Likewise though, his toughness damage is lacking, only tickling Japard occasionally. Fu Xuan has decent AoE toughness and team-wide buffs, and the CC immunity is great, but not being fully SP positive and only providing 12% crit rate to compensate hasn't aged particularly well on the offensive side. Aventuring's 50% FRS boost significantly increases the chance that no one gets frozen, but it's not foolproof on anyone but himself, and he does like 0 toughness to anyone except Japard, like Luocha. Not benefiting from 50% outgoing healing bonus and not playing well with non-follow-up teams also hurts him a bit. Lynx is a great budget option, with the 50% outgoing healing compensating for her smaller heals, the SP refund on break compensating for general SP neutrality, and she has a cleanse on her ult, but she is still a budget option nonetheless. Going over the rest, Bailu's lack of cleanse hurts her here, but she's otherwise great for heal-hungry and squishy teams. March has single target shields and her ult freeze does nothing. Natasha is okay, but lacks an AoE cleanse on ult or offensive benefits like Lynx has, and Fire Trailblazer Sustain is laughable despite their fire toughness and lore accurate matchup. As for Kafka's side, Hyacine also works well, but so does Aventurine for follow-ups and imaginary toughness, plus Lingsha for the same, and fire toughness, plus AoE at that with few. Gallagher is still Gallagher, printing SP, energy, and single target toughness, just without the potential AoE upside that Lingsha has. And Huohuo's energy is still important, however in terms of dealing with burst sustain, they are the best of the worst, so to speak. Make sure you don't get careless with them so as to avoid any accidental 2-shots. Luocha and Fu Xuan, on the other hand, can easily handle burst damage but offer less utility overall. Bailu is the extreme of tanking burst but lacking utility, especially versus Kafka's dominates and ice out of space's freezes. Lynx, as per usual, has lacking heals but AoE cleanse on her ult, and the max HP increase, while not team-wide like Bailu's, helps a bit too. March, Natasha, and Fire Trailblazer just don't provide enough versus the Kafka fight, unfortunately. I don't see any of them doing well. Supports, as per usual, are the most team-dependent. Ranmei's 50% weakness break efficiency is excellent versus a straightforward break fight like Cocolia's, and the ult refund on break helps with her usual 2/3 uptime. Robin's additional turns from her ult can also add more toughness damage to your team, and she gets a free one back every break. Cypher does good single target quantum toughness, but the real selling point is, of course, her ability to store damage and deal it later as true damage on phase 2. I'll be preemptively placing her at the top, especially since she should fare well with Fei Xiao and help out Acheron. But just know that in terms of practical viability, she is Schrodinger's cat. Sunday is Sunday, giving lots of buffs, double turns, and more ults per ult. Bronya does what he does, but with the ability to advance Harmony, boost speed at E2, and even provide follow-ups at E4 instead of being SP positive, giving energy and having better buff uptime. Depending on the team, this might be more valuable, especially with the full SP and ult refund on break, but it's more uncommon than it is common. As for RMC, they're just as broken as usual, but the full team-wide ult refund on break, plus 40% more charge stored in their own ult, all but guarantees an immediate mem advance, giving them a unique advantage in this AS. Tribute has chip quantum toughness as well as debuffs and follow-ups for the DPS that want it. Silverwolf, meanwhile, leans full in on single target quantum toughness and debuffs, plus has the added utility of implanting Cocolia, who removes her weaknesses without locking her toughness. All of this makes Cocolia her best possible AS matchup, and gives her legitimate use cases over Xiao Chou and Repella, but she's usually not worth running over Harmonies outside of Acheron teams. At least it's close though. Xiao Chou is obviously still paired with Acheron, and his fire toughness still helps despite not being on the same level as Silverwolves. In regards to the Super Breakers, Fugue is best, followed by HMC, whose imaginary toughness can only help break Japard. If attached to DDD though, which can be re-triggered upon break's ult refresh, the gap closes a bit. Tingyan has her usual niche cases as a DDD and energy bot, while Sparkle can provide plenty of SP, especially with the ult refund providing her with another 4. Besides Dill and Xingxue though, I'm not sure the demand for SP is that particularly high yet, but we'll see. Asa and Pellas both serve as good generalists, but Asa's good fighter toughness requires SP to expend, and her attack and speed buffs aren't quite on the level of other harmonies. Likewise, Pella has generally good debuffs, but they're outclassed by premium options, and outside of Silverwolf or Anaxa, she isn't dealing any toughness damage. Hanya isn't quite as good, having no toughness and lackluster amp, while Yukong's downtime and only some toughness on Shepard still persists, even with the free ult every break. As for Kafka's side, single target and thus follow-up is king, making Robin the best go-to choice, especially again considering the free ult on break. And for you AV maxers, by pairing ult refresh with Caster's global passive with the huge AoE at the start of phase 2, you can somewhat consistently kill Robin early and thus get her ult immediately instead of waiting for it to end. Trivy is otherwise a generally solid runner-up, and of course does great in HP scaling teams and personally tanking Kafka's hips. Otherwise, Ron made 50% weakness break efficiency is as valuable as ever, as is RMT gaining almost 100% charge per ult refund upon break, and Sunday's universally strong hypercarry crit and energy buffs. As a whole, Brave has a stronger comparative matchup overall versus the stage, meaning they're placed a bit higher comparative versus Cocolia. Fugue still beats HMC as a super break support, especially since the double elite plus boss structure makes extra toughness breaks all the more valuable. But HMC actually gets to deal toughness damage, which is great so long as you're okay with a few hits being wasted from bounce RNG. Bronya has her usual double actions niche that's outranked by Sunday, though with more SP likely to be used on heals, you might find her slightly more awkward versus this stage outside of, say, Fei Xiao and Anaxa teams. Tingyan is your usual energy and DDD bot, as you might expect. Cypher, meanwhile, is placed a bit lower due to not contributing quantum toughness, as well as her true damage being soaked up by the phase 2 elites, but who knows? Bypassing 50% damage reduction might be more broken than it seems. Sparkle has Dill to lean on this time, which is nice, and can work properly with Mighty and Yin Li, provided you don't have Robin, RMC, or Sunday available to you. Xiao Cho is generally good too, but his fire toughness is a little less beneficial here compared to versus Cocolia, and Acheron doesn't match up as great versus Kafka. Asa has bounce RNG that stifles her toughness plus lackluster buffs. Pella is off element again, and if I remember correctly, all the buffs in this fight are unremovable, which is a shame considering that utility might have made her a slower but safer option. Silverwolf is also awkward to use versus 2 elites and a boss, but if you want to bring casters to this side, she is your key to brute forcing. Hanya and Yukong are much the same in terms of being underwhelming and difficult for general use, respectively, but the fact that they're on elements might rank them slightly higher than how I place them on this list. We'll have to see though. Alright, with the character evaluations out of the way, let's look at Cocolia's and Kafka's attack patterns in more detail. Note that the following damage calculations assume that your character is at level 80 with 1000 defense. Starting with Cocolia, on turn 1 she summons 2 Ice Edges, then performs Chill of Bone-Piercing Coagulation, which is a single target attack for 1000 damage, and repeats on a different target for each alive Ice Edge. This is pretty much guaranteed to hit 3 times. On turn 2, she uses Hoarfrost of Eternal Isolation, which is a single target attack for 600 damage and a 50% base chance to freeze. It also repeats for each remaining Ice Edge for up to 3 hits. This is immediately followed by another Chill. On turn 3, she uses Hoarfrost again, followed by Wrath of Winterland Saints, which gives her a 30% damage boost and charges her nuke. And finally, on turn 4, she unleashes her nuke, Punishment of Endless Winter, an AoE that hits for 1600 damage after the boost, followed by another Chill. Cocolia's phase 2 is instead a 3-turn rotation, starting by summoning 4 lances, then locking onto a random target. Her second turn is Soulrend Coldstream, a single target hit for 1150 damage that also has a 50% base chance to freeze. Like phase 1, it repeats per lance left alive, so a maximum of 5 hits. The first Soulrend always hits the lock-on target, then the rest of the hits, if any, target randomly. This is then followed up by the Creator's Resolve, which boosts Cocolia's damage by 20% and her speed by 20%, and the Creation's Prelude, which actually charges her nuke next turn. Last Choir of Genesis, an AoE attack that hits for 1900 damage. Followed by Genesis Chord, a single target attack for 800 damage with a 100% chance to imprison. This attack, say it with me, also repeats per lance left alive for a maximum of 5 hits. Afterwards, she uses the Creation's Prelude, charging another nuke, and until you break her, she will keep repeating this turn. Have fun! Throughout both phases, focusing down her summons is the best way to reduce both her damage and CC. As for the rest of Cocolia's entourage, Gepard is relatively simple. His turn 1 is 2 single target attacks, Smite of Frost, which hits for 1700, provided by Fist of Conviction, which hits for 1150. His second turn is another Fist of Conviction, followed by the dreaded Garrison Aura Field. Gepard locks everyone toughness but his own, and puts up a shield that can only be broken after either dealing 50% of Gepard's HP as shared damage, or breaking his toughness. Reminder that Gepard has a toughness of 200, which is 50 higher than Phase 1 Cocolia's toughness of 150 after killing the Ice Edges. Also, as a side note, he only shares Lightning and Quantum weaknesses with Cocolia, while Imaginary is completely absent from Cocolia's list of weaknesses. Yeah, I can see why people found him pretty annoying. His third turn, then having performed Tit for Tat, which has encountered all attacks with a Smite of Frost, immediately after which he uses a Smite of Frost. Ice Edges and Lances are pretty simple, just doing AoE hits of 750 and 950 respectively. Just keep them in mind so you don't get comboed down by them in Cocolia. Alright, now on to Kafka. Keep in mind that all of her attacks re-trigger any shock DOTs on her target, which deal about 200 damage, and if any shock target is attacked, she immediately follows with Cruelty, a single target attack for 400 damage. For AoEs and such, if there are multiple shock targets hit, I believe she chooses one target at random for Cruelty. Someone let me know if I'm wrong in the comments though. On Phase 1, she immediately spawns 2 elite Spacies which inherit her weaknesses, or if she has already finished her attack rotation, spawns them on this turn, which is why this action is placed under the turn 1 list despite technically happening instantly at the start of battle. After this, her first attack is Midnight Tumult, a single target attack that hits for 950 with a 50% base chance to shock. Turn 2 is Caressing Moonlight, a blast attack that hits for 950 on the main target and 650 on adjacent targets. If the main target is shocked, adjacent targets also become shocked as well. Turn 3 is Spirit Whisper, a single target 120% base chance to dominate one ally for 3 turns, locking them into basic against your team. If at any point before this, you manage to kill both elites, she switches to Silent and Sharp Mockery instead, dealing 1150 AoE damage. And on the following turn, she repeats Caressing Moonlight again, and restarts this attack pattern. Phase 2 Kafka also spawns 2 elites under the same instant speed as Phase 1, followed by Seething Whisper of the Fallen, which is a single target attack for 950 with a 50% chance to shock, that also deals an extra 450 to all other shock targets. Turn 2 is Caressing Moonlight, and turn 3 is Psychological Suggestion, which has a 120% base chance to place a removable debuff for 3 turns, and adds Revelation to the action order. After Revelation acts at 127 AV, all still debuff targets get dominated, which should be anyone that isn't cleansed, since most characters don't act at 238 speed. Just like in Phase 1, if there are no elites before this turn starts, she uses Silent and Sharp Mockery, followed by another Caressing Moonlight. Honestly, not too bad if Kafka was by herself, which, well, she definitely isn't. We can't talk about Kafka without mentioning those pesky elites. For the Phase 1 Spacies, Blaze Out of Space gets a Molten Fusion stack from Kafka which buffs his attack by 30% for 2 turns, after which he does a bounce attack for 400 times 5. Each hit having a 50% base chance to inflict a stackable burn for 200 for 2 turns. Immediately after this though, it absorbs all burns and charges its nuke, Bomb en masse. It does 1350 AoE, but an extra 300 damage per burn absorbed, followed by another 30% attack boost for 2 turns. Ice of Space, on the other hand, starts with an enhanced delay from Kafka, which means that freezing also results in a 25% action delay. Afterwards, it immediately uses Everwinter Rain, a 750 AoE attack with a 60% base chance of freeze and deal 100 damage when thawing. This is followed by Chilling Lament, a single target 950 damage attack that does 400 more damage versus frozen targets. Its next turn is instead Chilling Lament, followed by Everwinter Rain. Very creative, Hoyo. Anyways, it keeps repeating this 2-turn attack pattern just like its Blaze friend. As for the Phase 2 dinos, Dream Jolt Tropes beyond Overcooked always has a 50% chance to inflict a minus 20% speed slow on hit for 2 turns, so hopefully it doesn't ruin your speed tuning. It always hits the team with Flaming Stir Fry for 2350 AoE damage until it receives 6 stacks of Stove Heating, accumulated per hit or DOT taken on its turn. I have no idea why they made this attack 0 AV on Phase 2, immediately followed up by a Kafka attack. That combo can legit burst down a single character for over 3000 HP. Upon hitting those 6 stacks, It deals 79k damage to everyone, lowers its own defense by 50% until its next flaming stir fry, then upon recovery uses Ladle Swirl, a softer single target attack for 1200. Keep in mind that breaking Overcooked does not cause it to hit 6 stacks, so you can miss out on the massive defense shred if you break too early. The other dino, Memory Stone memes Shell of Fated Rage, is no slouch either. It gains 60% damage reduction on top of its massive health pool when not broken, but to compensate, it receives 50% more damage and delays its next action by 75% if broken. Besides being uber tanky and less broken though, it starts with 3 Obscure Blaze, gets gifted another by Kafka at the start of its turn, then uses Bone Piercing Odium, dealing 750 bounce hits equal to the number of Obscure Blaze it has, which at this point should be 4 for a total of 3000 bounce damage. Next turn, it gains 3 more stacks and has its Obscure Blaze at 7, meaning that its following Bone Piercing Odium now hits 7 times for 5250 bounce damage. On the one hand, having more bodies via Memo Sprites reduces the average damage spread across teammates, but on the other, if you lose any bodies, this attack is sending your run straight to the west wind. All in all, paired with the elites, Kafka's main mechanic is damage, lots of it. A bit of CC, especially in phase 1, but bursting your team down is definitely her focus. As for my overall thoughts, well, I mean it's nice that we're moving away from AoE bosses, but besides the increased HP and attack, these bosses don't feel too different from last time. Cocolia's and Kafka's toughnesses have remained the same, which on one hand is nice, but on the other hand it really drives home just how straightforward their mechanics are. Especially when you consider that Cocolia still has the DOT buff, thankfully being a lot better this time, and Kafka still has a follow-up attack buff. Not to mention that the weakness break buff for Kafka is skill point and ult recovery 2 times in a row. Besides the Memo Sprite buff on Cocolia's side, which exclusively benefits 3 limited 3.x characters, and the Crimson Tide buff on Kafka's side, whose 20% heal on skill is counterbalanced by a 10% damage increase unless you're specifically Castress or Maide, there isn't really anything new. Oh, I guess there's the fact that implanting all 7 weaknesses with Cocolia makes her 15% more vulnerable, so pretty much Anaxa only has res down implants at home. That being said, it's nice to see Silverwolf having a legitimate use case versus Cocolia, even before her buffs. Top clears have also been cooking with support of Anaxa and Casterus, with Anaxa enabling the Herda to be one of the strongest DPSs versus a 60% ice res enemy, and Casterus letting Robin die and revive early for a second sub 100 AV ult. Fei Xiao and 3.0 pullers, as well as vertically invested 2.0 pullers, should have no problem with this patch, and in general 3-star clearing should still be okay, but if you want to make your 1.0 DPS excel without ideal and vertically invested supports, forget it. It really feels like the floor and ceiling for clear speed alike has been raised to 3.x standards. HP has been steadily on the rise, spiking up from 1.3 million to 2 million HP across 2024 for single target apocalyptic shadow bosses, and now reaching an average of just under 3 million today. This gradual HP increase means that comps that used to do comfortably well against the same bosses start to just barely scrape by, while those just barely hanging on risk dropping out. And of course, this drop-off curve is way harsher for sustainless comps. At the very least, RMT exists, and even as a free unit, they perform up to what you'd expect out of a 3.0 unit. And of course, our first round of buffs will be live before this rotation is over. So here's to hoping that Dot, Blade, and Silverwolf see way more success here post-buffs, as a proof of concept that said buffs are strong and useful. Not putting that pressure on Jingliu yet, when she has no ice weakness to exploit, nor any optimal implant support to brute force through. But still, with the current game state as it is now, there are definitely some units that deserve to be buffed. Personally, out of our limited roster, I'm hoping for Sela, Topaz, Dr. Ratio, and Black Swan to see some buffs. Their lackluster performances in this apocalyptic shadow make it clear to me that they could definitely use a power booster too. So, all in all, yeah, the meta keeps getting harder and harder to catch up with the longer you save your pulls. That's almost certainly by design and pretty well known, I feel like, by now. Make sure you're aware of that and don't let FOMO dictate when you swipe. We got a huge patch ahead of us. Holy frick, they're doing a really good job of trying to sell Hyacine though. Also, Hail Eagle and Dance 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 getting 2 free ults per rotation makes them insanely broken in the right setups. Thanks for watching.